A leaked White House report criticizes Pakistan for failing to confront the Afghan Taliban. Is the conflict overburdening Pakistan, or is Islamabad looking ahead to the post-US withdrawal era in Afghanistan? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Sami Zaidi. Well, Taliban attacks on military convoys have soared recently since Pakistan shut a key border crossing because of a NATO airstrike which killed at least 2 Pakistani soldiers. Well, the US has now apologized for the attack. NATO says it expects the border route to be resolved soon. But relations with Islamabad have been placed in further doubt by a White House report questioning Pakistan's willingness to curb militants. Well, the leaked report says Pakistani forces are avoiding direct conflict with the Afghan Taliban and al-qaeda. Kimberly Halkett reports.
The White House report, leaked to a major U.S. newspaper, quotes an unnamed White House official criticizing President Asif Ali Zardari in particular for his lack of leadership. And it accuses Pakistan's military of increasingly not doing enough to tackle radical elements within its borders, and has continued to avoid military engagements that would put it in direct conflict with Afghan Taliban or al-qaeda forces in North Waziristan.
The shift is evident in the military action that Pakistan has taken within its own borders. You know, Pakistan has had to take its foot off the gas, so to speak. The insurgents haven't given up. And we want to see the government continue to take effective action.
Pakistan government maintains it isn't an issue of will, but of resources. Its army is stretched thin, responding to major flooding this past summer, the worst in the country's history, that has left more than 20 million people displaced or homeless. The White House report exposes a once private rift and building frustration the U.S. has with its ally that is spreading to U.S. lawmakers. Who couldn't turn argue, the report justifies placing even more conditions on the current billions the U.S. supplies in funding to Pakistan.
The U.S. and Pakistani goals are simply not the same.
This former U.S. intelligence officer says despite Pakistan's claims to be a key U.S. ally, it's maintained a relationship with al-qaeda and the Taliban, and has been reluctant to send large numbers of troops to North Waziristan to target alleged fighters holding out in Pakistan.
So one of the paradoxes of this war is Pakistan is supposedly a partner of the United States in fighting extremism, but they have had their own dealings with our enemy in Afghanistan, namely the Afghan Taliban.
The White House will review its war strategy in 2 months. Up until now, President Obama has always argued there's no need to change the U.S. Afghanistan-Pakistan strategy. It's an argument, in light of this report, that is increasingly becoming difficult to defend. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, to discuss the issue, we're now joined by our guests in Kabul, Mullah Salam Zaif, former Taliban ambassador to Islamabad, and in Islamabad, Musharraf Zaidi, a Pakistani political analyst, and in Washington, D.C., Simon Henderson, a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Welcome to all of you. If I could start with Mr. Henderson in Washington, D.C. Do you think the U.S. has now come to a sort of realization or position that it thinks that the Pakistani intelligence agency, at least, has calculated it has more to gain by supporting the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, rather than fighting it?
Yes, that's very much the case, and indeed in the headline, the top headline across the front of the Wall Street Journal today is yet a further story from this report that you've just mentioned, and the headline reads, "Pakistan urges on the Taliban," which is a pretty devastating critique of Pakistan, and a greater indication, if any was needed.
But has Washington really resolved the question, perhaps in its mind, as to whether this is the official policy of the ISI, or whether this is perhaps can be explained as rogue elements within the Pakistani intelligence?
Well, I suspect they believe it's the real policy. But if in the absence of the ISI saying it's the real policy, there will always be an element of doubt, and no doubt the ISI and the rest of the Pakistan government will deny it.
All right, let's take some of the points now to Mr. Zaidi in Islamabad. Is Pakistan unable or unwilling to help the US in the fight? What do you think?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think the willingness. Carl Levin, who looks after sort of in the Senate, I think he's part of the Senate Armed Services Committee, said that, you know, Pakistan won't go after the people that threaten us. They'll only go after the people that threaten the Pakistani government. And I think a lot of, you know, reasonable people need to ask what about that is surprising or shocking. That's completely rational, that Pakistan should focus its primary effort on those that threaten Islamabad, those that threaten Rawalpindi, those that threaten the lives and the well-being of Pakistani citizens here. And so that
But hang on, it sounds, Mr. Zaidi, like you're suggesting Pakistan is simply focusing on the Pakistani Taliban rather than actually encouraging or urging on, as Mr. Henderson was quoting there, the Afghan Taliban.
Well, I think at least from the view from Islamabad is that those are two related, obviously very closely related, but separate discussions. I don't think there's been ever any doubt since 2001, since 1996, since 1978, I mean, however far back you want to go, that Pakistan has a very strong interest in influencing what the government in Kabul looks like. And of course, since 96, we know that its primary sort of player in Afghanistan have been the Kandahari Taliban, the people that, you know, that are led by Mullah Omar. So I don't think there's anything new or surprising about that. And I think what I think shocks a lot of people in Islamabad, in Pakistan, is this repeated sense of, you know, brouhaha that's raised every time the White House issues another report that says exactly the same thing that the White House and the Pentagon and the intelligence community in the United States said last year and said 2 years ago and said 3 years ago. It's the same thing. Pakistan doesn't do what we want it to do. Pakistan keeps doing what it wants to do. And again, the question is, well, what about that is so shocking? This isn't a moralistic sort of a discussion. It's a discussion about the international political economy. Why do people anywhere expect that Pakistan would behave in any interest other than its own as its primary objective?
All right, talking about what Pakistan is doing, let's talk to someone who might have a better idea about the people it's doing it to. Mullah Salam Zaif, you used to be Taliban ambassador to Pakistan. How do you now read official Pakistani policy towards the Afghan Taliban?
The major thing here is the problem in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I think the Americans, since 10 years, they did a lot of operation in Afghanistan, in Pakistan too, and they wanted to punish the Taliban, they wanted to stop the problem, and they wanted to occupy the country completely, but they became unsuccessful in this operation. When any party or any government became upset or became unsuccessful in the mission, they are condemning the other people that's who is helping with opposition.
If we could talk more frankly, Mullah Salam, are you saying that Pakistan is not deliberately avoiding confrontation with the Afghan Taliban, as this White House report suggests?
No, I'm coming to that. If we look to the Pakistan, what they are doing with the Taliban, more than, by my information, more than 2,000 Taliban, Afghanistan Taliban, by the name of Taliban, they are in the prisons of Pakistan, in the secret prison, and since 10 years, they are capturing the Taliban, putting in the jail. There are some people since 8 years, 9 years, 7 years, 6 years, and until today they are capturing the people. The Pakistan, they did what they wanted from Pakistan, and I think this became a problem to the Pakistan. Nowadays the Pakistan is destabilizing, and the economy is collapsing, and the Pakistan is in very troubled time, and the Pakistan cannot able to do any more what the American want from Pakistan because of the benefit of Pakistan. And the Pakistan,
let me put a question this way. To your information,
Afghanistan.
Mullah Salam, is the Taliban receiving any sort of support whatsoever from the Pakistani intelligence services, even perhaps rogue elements?
I don't agree. This will be official way from the Pakistan. They are supporting the Taliban. I don't agree with that. But the Pakistan divided by two separate, the nation, the government, that some kind of people, they are following the strategy which the American want from Pakistan. Some other, the majority of the Pakistan, they don't agree with American what they are doing. They are not helping with American. And
right.
In the war community, divided by that. In the Muslim community, the same thing. Maybe
okay.
some people,
there,
they are supporting Taliban, but officially the government, they are not supporting.
All right, you were talking about the cost that Pakistan's paid. Let's take a closer look at that price that the country's paid for its support of U.S. War efforts there. According to official figures, the U.S., of course, has given almost $15.5 billion since 2002 to Pakistan, but about 2/3 of that is security-related funding, the rest, of course, economic aid. But earlier this year, Pakistan's President, Asif Ali Zardari, said the war on militancy, as he put it, had cost Pakistan $35 billion in the last 8 years, almost paralyzing Pakistan's economy. Well, according to Pakistani officials, in 2009, of the nearly 4 dozen drone attacks launched by the US, only 5 were able to hit their actual targets, killing 5 key al-qaeda and Taliban leaders, but at the cost of over 700 innocent lives. Well, that translates to about 140 innocent Pakistani civilians for each al-qaeda and Taliban member killed by US drones. Well, with a perceived loss of sovereignty to the US, American involvement in Pakistan has also served to increase militancy and anti-American sentiment. Let's take some of those sentiments now to Washington, D.C. Mr. Henderson, as the situation no doubt is becoming more and more difficult for the U.S. in the north of Pakistan as well as across the border in Afghanistan, can we then expect the U.S. to take a more aggressive posture as a result of any perceived feet dragging on the part of Islamabad?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I think the answer is probably yes, even though the President Obama has outlined a strategy which will lead to an American withdrawal, which is being widely interpreted, certainly here in the United States and possibly across the world, as being not quite the commitment that the US should be putting into this situation. If I can make one point here, the question has arisen of why the US should expect Pakistan to behave in any other manner. Well, for a very simple reason. The US is paying Pakistan a lot of money in order to for Pakistan to support the US operations in Afghanistan.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. I can see
happening.
Mr. Musharraf shaking his head. A quick response to you, Mr. Musharraf.
Well, the simple rule of economics, if the money that's being provided isn't altering the behavior, then it's quite clear that it's not enough money. If we look at the amount of aid that's been given to Pakistan, the vast majority, you said 2/3, I would argue that it's significantly more, and I would counter that $15.5 billion isn't quite the figure. It's a little bit less than that, and the vast majority of that money has been fueling the military in Pakistan.
All right,
so the
money
United States
enough.
only pays.
Hang on, I want to bring in Mr. Henderson back again for a response to that. The money isn't enough, Mr. Henderson.
Well, I mean, that's quite an interesting comment. How much money does Pakistan want? Let us know, because there'll be people watching this program, or I can tell people in Washington that they should cough up more money. So if it's, say for sake of argument, the figure that Pakistan has so far received from the United States is, say, between $12 and $15 billion, i.e. at the rate of perhaps, and it's now, I believe, running at a rate of about $6 or $7 billion a year. How much does Pakistan want and need to alter its behavior?
All right, Mr. Musharraf.
The first point is that the total aid does not exceed $12 billion, but let's not get caught up in that figure. More than $6 billion of that money has been used by the Pakistani government to purchase American military hardware. The rest of the money has been used to reimburse Pakistani troops for fighting this war, which they clearly either at the leadership level or at the operational level. They clearly, according to the White House again and again and again, they clearly don't own this war.
Well,
so I think Simon is right to be frustrated.
Maybe I could move the discussion along a little bit and say, is it really about the money, or could it be at this point about the fact that there is some sort of tentative withdrawal date looming in the air? Could Pakistan be looking at what happens after the US troops reduce or get out of Afghanistan? Do we really want to have no cards there?
I think that it's a little bit of both. And I mentioned the money because the money really hasn't been for the Pakistani people. It hasn't helped usher in any kind of a transformation economically, socially, politically. All it's done is that it's strengthened the military in this country. And the military, as many people, including I'm sure Simon and Mullah Zaif would agree, is one of the most dominant and probably negative influences in the region in terms of how it exercises political power in Pakistan. So I think the problem fundamentally has been the relationship between the United States and the Pakistani military. The Pakistani people really haven't been a part of that until only very recently, and even now, it's only now barely trickling in. The total amount of civilian aid that's being promised to Pakistan is $1.5 billion under the Kerry-Lugar bill. But that money for the past year has not been realized. When Clinton was in town earlier in the year, she earmarked about 1/3 of that money. We're still a long way away from reaching $6 or $7 billion a year that the United States is providing to Pakistan. That's just the money part of the argument. There's a political will part of the argument too, and that's the argument to which there is no answer. And it's unfortunate because we're going to kind of have to throw our hands up in the air and say, you know, that's just how life is. In fact, there's no reason for Pakistan to behave in any way that isn't aligned with what it thinks is going to be the final calculus here. And so you mentioned the July 2011 day.
There may not be 100% political will. Let's take this to Mullah Salam Zaif. Can the American plan to sort of try and weaken the Taliban, then bring them in a weakened position to the negotiating table, do you think that can work without 100% support from the Pakistani intelligence services?
I think there's the peace in the region. The whole nation in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, they want peace. They want to see the fighting in the region to stop. They want to see the situation to be stable. That's the people want. And the American, if they really want to respect to the nation, to respect to the independence of the country, and to respect to the human right and the people right in Afghanistan, this is possible, but there is a lot of obstacle in the way. And I think I will tell you that the presence of American in the region, this is the main and fundamental problem in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the presence of the American, this is not acceptable.
Does the Taliban, has the Taliban shown, to your information, any signs that it might be interested in joining negotiations?
I'm coming to this point. The main issue, the main problem is the presence of American in the region. If the American really want to be in the region, I think this is not possible to make any negotiation with the Taliban and to resolve this problem. If they show, the Americans show that they want to leave Afghanistan and they don't want to be in Afghanistan, or basically, or the troops, and they want to see Afghanistan independent, and they want to respect to the Taliban, they want to remove the obstacle from the way to the negotiation, I think this is possible. This is the easy way. It will be acceptable to the Taliban too.
All right, but so basically you're saying that there is a way forward for negotiations. Allow me to ask an even more direct question. I understand you were involved in the conference that was held in the Serena Hotel in Kabul. Did you in any way obtain even some sort of green light, shall we say, from the Taliban to attend those talks? I understand you were not representing the Taliban officially, but were they even aware?
No, the Serena conference, this was the conference unofficially. There was no any representative from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, even from the Taliban. The individuals there, they were just the intellectual.
But excuse me, I'm sorry, Mullah Salam, if I may quote to you, the Pakistani Pashtun party known as PMAP, the provincial chief, did attend those conference or those talks, however you like to put it, along with you. Mukhtar Ahmed Khan Yusuf Zai said about those talks that they aimed at creating a mechanism for peace talks with the Taliban. Now, is he wrong?
No. That's a conference. What was the cause of this conference? What was the aim of this conference? They were talking about the problem. What is the fundamental problem, and what will be the
But here's a Pakistani political
or
figure saying the talks aim to create a mechanism of negotiations with the Taliban.
No, they didn't do any mechanism for that, and they should continue this kind of investigation in the future. I don't know when and what time will be suitable to make a mechanism, but right now the agenda was just what is the problem and what will be the solution. And maybe in the next time they should discuss about the other issues, the negotiation, what kind of negotiation and what kind of mechanism they are making.
Did you have any backing from the Taliban in attending or those talks at all?
No one was from the Taliban, and the Taliban, they were not aware from this program.
Right.
And this is just the private thing. Unfortunately, this came to the media.
I'm sorry,
they didn't want to come to the media. This was just
Let me try
private.
with the final few minutes that we have. Let's go back to Washington, D.C. Do you see, Mr. Henderson, that the position of the U.S. is ultimately perhaps going to have to change, maybe along the lines that we're seeing the official Afghan position change towards talking with the Taliban? They're already dropping some of their preconditions, aren't they?
I think the U.S. position fundamentally is very clear. The speaker representing, who was the former ambassador of the Taliban in Islamabad, forgets why the Americans are in Afghanistan or indeed in Pakistan at the moment, and that is because of the attacks of 9/11. So the United States' bottom line is that the territory of Afghanistan and indeed of Pakistan is not used for further terrorist attacks on the United States or its allies and interests across the world.
Right, understood, Mr. Henderson, but my question is, if we're seeing not 100% Pakistani support, and we're seeing the Afghan officials dropping some of their preconditions about talking with the Taliban, is it too far-fetched to imagine the Americans may come to the same position?
Well, frankly, you know, if you're involved in politics or international affairs, when it comes down to it, nothing is in particular too far-fetched. But it comes back to the original point of the discussion, which is the money. And the money has to come from the U.S. taxpayer, and it has to be approved by the U.S. Congress. Unless the U.S. Congress can be persuaded of the finer points of these arguments, then Pakistan isn't certainly going to get any increased money, and probably won't even get the money that it thinks it's going to get.
All right, perhaps we'll get a final comment or thought from Mr. Musharraf in Islamabad. And I wonder whether, if the money isn't right, and if there's a feeling, perhaps as there seems to be in Pakistan, that Indian influence might be creeping up and increasing in Afghanistan, does that become a vicious cycle where Islamabad only has more and more incentive to, well, shall I say, at least turn a blind eye to the Afghan Taliban?
Absolutely. But I think it is worth noting, and I think Mullah Zaif pointed it out earlier, you know, often the view from Washington, D.C. is obscured by this, by the post-9/11 narrative. The complexity of being in Pakistan is actually, you know, is quite rich. And I think the idea that the Taliban, even the Afghan Taliban, is one whole monolith, and that the Pakistani Taliban is another monolith, and the al-qaeda is another monolith, I think it's a lot more sort of nuanced and detailed than that. And Pakistan has made some enemies among these groups. This is not a situation in which Pakistan has, you know, blindly supported, you know, terrorists or terrorist enablers. There's a long history to all of this, which the U.S. Has been party to. And I think the ultimate solution will be one in which, like you suggested, there'll be some sort of a consensus between the United States, Pakistan, other regional powers like Iran, like Russia, and India. There'll be some kind of an agreement that there are some red lines that can't be crossed. But ultimately, as Simon mentioned, the American taxpayer is under a lot of stress and certainly cannot conceive of ratcheting up this fight any longer. It's already the longest war in American history.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there and thank our guests in Kabul, Salam Zaif, in Islamabad, Musharraf Zaidi, and in Washington, D.C., Simon Henderson. And thank you so much for joining us here in this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Just drop us a line. Email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, thanks for watching.